Welcome to another edition of the Akoben videocast. My name is Junious Ricardo Stanton. Akoben is an Ndinkra word and symbol of the Akan people who reside in the Ghana area of West Africa. The Akoben is a specially carved animal's horn that makes a distinct and unique sound. Traditional villagers use it to call for alertness, awareness, preparation, assembly, and in extreme cases, mobilization. We sound the Akoben to inform you of current events, present intriguing ideas and interesting personalities, and is also as balance the scales against the claptrap, the mind-numbing propaganda, deceit, and lies that we are subjected to via the mainstream media and their digital platforms. Today we're going to share a piece that I wrote and want to give a different perspective on what's happening regarding the reactionary response to what's called critical race theory, and this is entitled "The Brouhaha Over Critical Race Theory." Quote, critical race theory, CRT, an intellectual movement and loosely organized framework of legal analysis based on the premise that race is not a natural, biologically grounded feature of physically distinct subgroups of human beings, but a socially constructed or culturally invented category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color. Critical race theorists hold that the law and the legal institutions in the United States are inherently racist insofar as they function to create and maintain social, economic, and political inequalities between whites and non-whites, especially African Americans, unquote. And that's taken from the Britannica and their definition of critical race theory. Many Americans are apoplectic over what is called critical race theory, a premise that says the notions of race, quote unquote, and racial differences, quote unquote, were deliberate social constructs established to create a codified race and color caste system in this country. That racism is institutionalized and deeply embedded in the fabric of this society. In August of 2019, the New York Times Magazine published the 1619 Project, and it created a firestorm by asserting slavery was the quintessential system that drove capitalism and the economics of both the British colonial era and formed the nexus that molded and shaped America commercially, economically, socially, and greatly influenced the form of government that was created after the Revolution. While the 1619 Project was not the first to assert slavery, race, and caste were infused into the fabric of this nation, its success became highly controversial because its premise and content shattered the myths and lies America tells itself about this country. During the social unrest unleashed during 2020 following the high-profile deaths of numerous African Americans by police, the very history of race in the creation of police departments in America resurfaced. The fact that slave patrols were the origin or primary reason for many constable, militias, and police departments, not only in the South, but the North as well. The response was swift and ferocious. Nicole Hannah-Jones, an investigative reporter and staff writer for the New York Times, who headed the 1619 Project, and the other essayists who contributed to it have been vilified and demonized. Former President Donald Trump started a movement to reject the notion the United States is a racist nation and pushed to prevent the true history from being taught in schools and presented as training in government agencies. Critics of the 1619 Project and critical race theory say it is divisive, not true, anti-white, and Marxist. These critics object to the idea slavery was a boon to European capitalism and helped the chartered monopoly trading companies, the monarchs, popes, and financiers become fabulously rich. Eric Williams' book, Capitalism and Slavery, and Edward Baptiste's book, The Half Has Never Been Told, Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism, totally debunked the critics' specious objections because slavery's free labor did indeed make European and American elites filthy rich. While the U.S. Constitution first uses the word slavery only in the 13th Amendment, slavery was all up in that document. Read the U.S. Constitution for yourself. You will see in Article 1, Section 2, the 3/5 clause, counting, quote, all other persons, unquote, meaning Africans in America, for purposes of congressional representation. In Section 9, importation of, quote, such persons, unquote, meaning slaves, cannot be debated or prohibited by Congress prior to 1808. And a tax or duty of no more than $10 for each person may be imposed. Article 4, the Fugitive Slave Act, makes it clear slavery was a top economic priority. Failure to comprehend these words allows the U.S. government to deny and obfuscate its role in the perpetuation and the profit from the institution of slavery. Now white parents are complaining their children are coming home from school crying because they're being taught what whites did to blacks and people of color in this country. These same people ignore the fact that notions of race and racial hierarchy were created as a means to reduce Africans in America to subservient status, divide poor whites who made up the indentured servant and bonded class against blacks so they would not unite to become a force against the colonial administrators and post-revolutionary ruling class, is what in fact gives them their unwarranted status and privileges in this country today. I strongly urge you to get a copy of In the Matter of Color, Race and the American Legal Process, the Colonial Period, and Shades of Freedom, Racial Politics and the Presumption of the American Legal Process by the late A. Leon Higginbotham, Jr. This distinguished federal judge researched the history and formation of race-based laws and racial oppression from the colonial period to the present. Reading these two books will put to rest any claims the 1619 Project is unhistorical hyperbole. The pushback against the 1619 Project belies the fact for centuries whites made up lies about Africa and Africans, perpetuated ruthless violence and abuse against blacks, and used every means at their disposal to denigrate us, caricature, and stereotype us in unflattering and dehumanizing ways. Old habits, attitudes, and brainwashing die hard. The 1619 Project creates cognitive dissonance, fear, and stress in whites and brainwashed Negroes. But it is time for truth. Malcolm X said, quote, I'm for truth, no matter who tells it. I'm for justice, no matter who it is for or against. I'm a human being first and foremost, and as such, I'm for whoever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole, unquote. Ashe. And this reactionary response to what they call critical race theory, which is nothing more than the telling of the truth or infusing facts into the ongoing American narrative, is very similar to the response of Afrocentrism, or the push that I experienced as an undergraduate when we demanded African history in the curriculum at Cheney State College, as it was called then. Fortunately for us, the administrators acquiesced, and we had very competent professors who told us the truth. And I can remember it was in Dr. Harris's class that I first learned that the Emancipation Proclamation freed no slaves. And he told us what it was. It was a PR tactic. It was a tactic to prevent the British from entering the war on the side of the Confederacy, because they were the beneficiaries of much of the cotton that was picked. And so we got a different and differing perspective. And of course, it's been said that history is the lie agreed upon. And so much of the history that has been agreed upon has been perpetrated and perpetuated by the winners, or the rulers, the ruling class, the oligarchs, who use history as a way to keep themselves in positions of power, but also as a way to fuse a people, particularly a diverse and disparate people like those that make up this country, a country basically of immigrants, settlers, and invaders who came here looking for fortune. Many of them were soldiers of fortune. Many of them were refugees fleeing persecution, and many of them were just unfortunate cannon fodder and free labor, particularly in the British colonies, where they emptied the prisons and they kidnapped people, and they also criminalized poverty in places like Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, so that they could use that situation to bring people here against their will. There was white slavery. They euphemistically call it indentured servitude or bonds persons. But these people were slaves. They treated them in many cases just as bad, and in some cases worse than they did the Africans, because they were free and the Africans cost them money. And I believe, and this my theory, is that one of the reasons why the call Black Lives Matter resonates so negatively in many whites is because they understood their history, how they were treated, because the blacks were more valuable as a labor and information commodity. Let's keep in mind, white people didn't know how to grow rice. It was the Africans that grew rice. We were not just brought here for brute strength, force, and labor. We were brought here for our intellectual prowess, our knowledge, and our history. There were metallurgists that came here. There were agriculturists that came here. There were fishermen that came here, that were brought here. And unfortunately, we've been taught that we contributed nothing to human society, when in fact we were the first to walk upright, the first to cogitate, the first to contemplate the serious matters of existence, the first to form cosmologies and cosmogonies about the nature, the origin and structure of the universe and our place in it. And we've been denied this credit. And it is time that we take our rightful place and assert ourselves as a major force in human development. The response to critical race theory is typical of those people who want to keep the rest of us ignorant, who want to keep us in a subservient status, and want to keep themselves in a place that they have not warranted or earned. They are not the great enlightened people that they profess to be. reading this book in the matter of color, and as he lays out the legal beginnings of slavery and how it was justified, particularly in Virginia, and how it moved from indentured servitude for the Africans that were brought to Point Pleasant to several a generation later into slavery and inherited perpetual slavery, is all in this book. And he cites the laws, he cites the cases, and so forth. And then this was the second part of what he hoped to be a trilogy on the legal issues facing Africans in this country, African Americans in this country. But unfortunately, he made transition before he could complete the third book. Capitalism and Slavery talks about the global impact of capitalism and how Europeans benefited from that institution. And this book, The Half Has Never Been Told, shares how capitalism bloomed because of slavery, particularly in the Deep South, and he chronicles how the spread of slavery and the tactics that were used increased productivity, and how the owners, the speculators, the financiers, and including foreign investors, benefited greatly from that whole process. So we're not to get caught up in this nonsense, this fight. This is just another fight to maintain the myth, to maintain the lies, to maintain the mendacity of the ruling class and of this society that wants to present itself in a far better light than it deserves. Are all white people evil? No. The challenge that we have is to look at our history, learn the lessons, and improve and make our situation better. Denying and holding on to lies, myths, and untruths is not going to make the situation better. If we are to stop the precipitous decline and the moral collapse and implosion of this country, the first step is to tell the truth and make amends and move forward. And we can only do that if, in fact, we engage in what I call mental decolonization. We throw off the chains of the brainwashing. We throw off the chains of programming, and we replace them with knowledge, understanding, and a whole process of cultivating the best that is within ourselves. All of us, all people, regardless of your phenotype, regardless of your cultural background, traditions, or heritage. We have the potential to be far greater, far more humane, far more conscious and productive in a way that benefits as opposed to hurts nature, our environment, and ourselves. So as we close out, I'm Junious Ricardo Stanton, encouraging you to engage in mental decolonization. Free your mind, the rest will follow. Till next time, stay safe, be strong, and be well. Peace.